So I'm first going to introduce myself, and then I'm going to introduce our business. So first and foremost, I'm a wife and mother, and I found that I have two passions. So I have a passion for grazing lands and also a passion for education. And so I'm feeding those passions right now as being the agricultural educator and FFA advisor at Kippawa County Schools, but also being the co-owner of the Rock and Flying Tea Ranch with my husband, Rex. So I'm going to start off with the number one question that Rex and I always get asked. And that's how did you get from Kansas to clear and north central Nebraska? And so it started out in the summer of 2016. I took an internship with Jerry Walensky. I spent the summer in the sandhills sorting grass for him and absolutely fell in love with the land. Convinced my then fiance that Nebraska wasn't just flat and corn. And so we moved up to north central Nebraska, where I got a ag teaching job at Kippawa County Schools. So that's how we got to Nebraska. So our ranch, or our business side, the Rock and Flying Tea Ranch, the next question people always ask us is, how did you get into goats? And we're like, well, we got into goats because we had the resources to get into goats. So Rex's dad had goats. We knew we wanted to get into production agriculture, and goats were cheaper, and we knew what they could do with grasslands because we've seen it with Rex's dad. However, what we didn't encounter was how much stress it was to keep them in. So, we actually had 2 herds of goats, okay? So the first herd that we got was in 2021. And we knew what they could do. And we were trying to figure out how to contain them to do what they could do, but in specific spots. And the first herd, we bought an electric netting. And if anybody has electric netting, that was not good for our marriage. So then we tried to make our own virtual fencing because they keep dogs in. So, I mean, a goat's like a dog. So, I mean, let's try to figure this out. So, we were trying to make virtual fencing. We had these dog collars. We bought a school bus. We connected the antennas. We figured out how to make boundaries shrink and get bigger. But what we couldn't figure out was how to get the battery charged in the collar, so you didn't have to handle the goats every day. So our outcome with the first herd was within 2 years we got rid of them. Too much stress to keep them in. We were trying to get a hold of No Fence, which is our virtual fencing collar that we use. They weren't ready to come to the United States. We're like, we need you, please come over. And after we sold our herd, like 2 weeks later, they called us and said, hey, we're like, we just sold them. So anyway, round 2. No Fence wasn't quite ready, like somebody else had already taken their trial run. So then we were on a waiting list. So we had our first herd, we did electric netting, we survived it. We're still married, so it's all good. Anyway, No Fence finally came, we got No Fence. So, round 2, we have Boer Spanish Cross. So, we learned a lot about there's difference between Boer and Spanish and how they graze. We started target grazing. We focused on brush control, weed suppression, and also native prairie restoration. We started contract grazing, and so what we're doing is putting another option on landowners' plate when it comes to wood encroachment and also leafy spurge. So I'm going to walk you guys through how to use virtual fencing with our goats. First I'm going to talk about the GPS collar. I'm going to talk about grazing practices, and then what we use for guard animal, and then also like our offspring management. So we have a GPS collar. We use No Fence. This is what it looks like. So every adult wears the GPS collar, and the offspring do not. So they'll stay with their moms. And so we actually start grazing with the collar, beginning of May, sometimes the end of April. And we go until November, beginning of December. And we give them a break. Okay, so we have a containment fence. Does it actually keep them in all the way? No, but it works for the winter time. So, anyway, the biggest thing with the virtual fencing that we've learned is that we follow no fence protocol, 100%, when it comes to training. So, we train for 2 weeks. So, we make sure that they're trained to the collar, and if you don't take the time to do that, and you're like, yeah, I've got these goats, I'm gonna put these collars on and throw them out in the pasture, good luck. So, but it's really been a game changer for our operation because we don't have the stress of, where are the goats today? Your guess is as good as mine. So, we did learn that the young goats are really hard on the neck bands when we first started. So like this part is the neck band. And so we have to consider in our budget and things that we're gonna replace this neck band every year for each collar. And that was something that we didn't like anticipate. However, we are finding the older they get, and also if we don't have them in that brush dense, they're not as hard on that neck band. Okay, so that's how we use that GPS collar. Grazing. We have learned that goats are not consistent with their grazing, and that we're going to tell you guys our observations, but there's no research on goats, because nobody can keep them in. And we are having a hard time figuring out if there's a specific thing that they're targeting. We have measured sugar content on different things to see if that was it, but we come to the conclusion that either A, it's just what they want to eat that day, or B, there's like some chemistry behind the chemical component of the plant that makes them want to eat that. So, what we have learned is goats are natural browsers, and so they prefer, they prefer to eat above their knees. There's also what we have seen and what research has told us. So, and what we have observed is that there's about a 20% crossover as far as what cattle eat with goats. And so they eat 20% about the same thing. However, they're browsers, so they don't like hit it. They like nibble the top and move on to the next thing. And so with that, in the virtual fencing, we are working on precision but not mob. So when we had the electric netting, we were mob grazing. And so we were seeing them eat grass. We were seeing them eat everything in the confinement that we have made. But with the virtual fencing, when they run out of that preferred forage, they hit the boundary, telling us it's time to move. Okay? So we're working on precision and not mob. And so our approach is that we are trying to leave as much grass as possible for our customers so they can run their cows. Because that is not our goal, and the goats tell us when we can move. Grazing trends that we have observed but not proven is leafy spurge. They seem to like it the whole time. They hit it first at any stage, from what we have observed. Buckbrush, they hit really hard in June, and then they'll still hit it in July hard and throughout, but it's not as preferred as it is in June. Plum thickets, July, typically. Sumac, they really like it when it's tender, so like where we were at September, October, but currently we're on a project where they have mowed it, and it's really tender, and so the goats are like really hitting the sumac right now. Cedar trees, we always get questions about cedar trees. So what we have seen on our first herd, which is why we were trying to contain them, was that they were killing 6-inch in diameter trees. Now, January, February, that's when they seem to really hit them. Our billies in in June were like destroying them. But then all of a sudden, like, we took them over to Florida and they didn't do anything. And I'm like, darn it. So, we're still trying to figure out the cedar a little bit more. Little blue stem, they really love the old little blue stems. So not the greener stuff, which they do hit the green stuff too, but like right before it starts greening up in the spring, it hit little blue stem really hard. So it's almost like you're burning it. So, which I come from the foothills, we burn all the time. And so, but up in Nebraska, like where we're at, burning is a little bit scary because you have so much more fuel. And so, it's nice to see the goats hitting up with the blue stem. So this is some pictures of our results. So that first one that you guys see here, this is buckbrush. This is that same picture, just a little bit closer of when we had the goats go through. And then this is a plum thicket. We also get questions about guard animals. Our first herd, right here, she was a great guard animal. But when she wanted to leave, she took the goats with her. So we got rid of the guard animals and we actually just used a trailer. And so the goats we have trained them that the trailer is their home. So if anything happens, they go back to their home. So they go back to the trailer. We use the trailer on every move. So the goats load up in the trailer and we move them. We're also finding with the virtual fencing and the trailer, they're using their natural instinct more. So like my husband's actually seen the goats load up in the trailer, make defense lines, and ward off a coyote. So, which is pretty miraculous, pretty awesome that we saw that. So we actually just used a trailer and we left the dogs. We're also mobile, so we didn't want a guard animal as well, and so the trailer has been working out really well for us. I will say though, you need an old trailer that you don't care about because goats are hard on stuff. So, offspring, we have found that Spanish is more aggressive grazers. They're also more independent. And so, when we had just our more herd, so like our starting herd on the second group, we got away with having the moms just have the vertical fencing and we didn't really worry about the kids, no big deal. Then we added Spanish. And they're way more independent. So about 4 months, they like group up and then take off and you have no idea where they're at. So at 4 months, we wean them and then we hot wire break them with the right netting. And then so once the replacement gets to be about 100 pounds, then we put a collar on them. Additional benefits that I found with the constantly moving and also the vertical fencing is number one, parasite control. Because we're constantly moving to move forage and helping with different projects, we're breaking the cycles of the parasites. And so that's been more feasible for our operation as far as deworming. Manure distribution, this was one that I didn't even think about until this year. So we were in a drought in the beginning of the spring. I was walking through pastures and all our projects. And the one thing that I noticed is that the grass was greening up where there was manure. Everywhere else it was still brown. And so that really got me to thinking about manure distribution and how much the goats are like natural manure spreaders, and they have a higher concentration of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in their manure. And so this year we really got to see the benefit of that. So herding instincts, so I talked about this a little bit more. Goats are really individualized, so they really like, when they're not on the vertical fencing, they're really spread out. Well, then it's harder for them to come together. And there's two things that I think are helping with that, and it's vertical fencing. We're keeping them in a specific location so they know where they're at, but also the trailer, because that's their home. So now whenever something happens, they all know that they're going home, and so they're all going to that trailer. And so I think that's really helping with our predator defense. And then the other one is land management option. We all know that chemicals are machinery, rising cost of labor. So this is just one more option for the landowners to help maybe combat that raising cost. Because it's getting harder to manage land, it's less feasible to manage land, and so this is another option for landowners. So this is our contact information. So I am more of like the, speaker, education, marketing person, paperwork. Rex is somewhere in the back, and he works with the virtual fencing, like on the ground. He's always with the goats. So grazing options, wild cow catching too, occasionally. So we also have a Facebook page, YouTube channel, and a website. So.
Where's Rex at? Stand up, please. Oh.